Hi there, and welcome back to Automation Days 2021. I'm really excited for our next discussion, our second panel discussion of the conference. And I have once again a great session of panelists to introduce for today. In this panel discussion, we're going to be talking about one of those issues that every company faces today, which is digital transformation. Digital transformation has become really one of those key buzzwords both in the business as well as the IT industry. And in this panel discussion, we're going to explore that topic a little bit more in detail, and we're going to be looking at some of the main aspects that are related towards digital transformation in the long run. I'm going to be joined today with an expert panel of speakers, which I will do a very brief introduction of. The first speaker on our panel is Laurie Kirk, who is the Executive Director of Business and Leadership at the Synergy Group. Laurie is joining us today all the way from Australia, and Laurie has a wealth of experience as a consultant and also as a director in program and project management, including the delivery of organization maturity assessments. He's also been involved in natural resource management sector for many years and a particular focus on developing with communications and client engagement. In 2006, Laurie joined the Australian National Centre for Public Awareness of Science and is also a recognized teacher in that particular area. Personally, I've known Laurie for many, many years, and he's been a very engaging and a good speaker to have on any kind of panel discussion for a good discussion. So welcome so much towards this panel, Laurie. It's really a pleasure to have you.
Thanks, Jan.
Good. Our next panelist is Bastiaan de Klerk, who is the head of experience of digital and brand marketing at Friesland Campina, which the people in Malaysia might better know as Dutch Lady. He has a strong history of digital transformation, change management, and always has a very strong vision on how you could use digital technology in order to optimize automations. So I thought he was a very good speaker for today to kind of show his insights more from a marketing perspective and how technology and digital transformation is changing the way that we work in a day-to-day real-life use case. So welcome, Bastiaan. Very glad to have you on the panel. For the people that don't know it, I'm Dutch and Bastiaan is also Dutch. I'm especially pleased to have another Dutchman on the panel today as well. But I promise we won't start talking in Dutch. Our last panelist is Dr. Esther Lu from Malaysian Airlines. And over the past 5 years, Dr. Esther has been active in driving technology innovation and adoption by introducing initiatives to encourage talent development in the digital age. Dr. Esther is very passionate about people analytics and researching new HR innovations. Today, she's the head of organization design and effectiveness at Malaysia Airlines, and leads the Human Capital Digital Transformation Roadmap. Dr. Esther is really no stranger to public talks and sharings when she shares her views on digital transformation, people analytics, learnings, and HR innovation. She's a frequent presenter at other conferences like the 2021 HRM Asia Singapore, as well as the Chief Digital Officer Summit. So Dr. Esther, it's also equally a great pleasure to have you in this session today. So to kind of get started, let's kind of dive right into it. Digital transformation, it's this container word, it's this buzzword. Every company is talking about it. Every company has been forced to deal with it, especially in last year with the whole global pandemic. If I can ask all of you to kind of define what that digital transformation means for you and your organization. Dr. Esther, before I start with you for that particular question, also want to let the audience know that they are highly encouraged to join the conversation. Yesterday, we had a lot of good discussions during the panel. So if you have questions for any of the panelists specifically or general questions, please feel free to use the Q&A button and functionality on the right-hand side of your screen, and I'll be happy to moderate these questions. Dr. Esther, what's your take on this?
Thank you, Jan. And I really love that you start this session with what is digital transformation, and you aptly put it. It's a buzzword. It's one of these trends that's happening. You know, every organization saying we need to go digital, we need to transform, we need to do digital transformation. But what is it exactly? Yeah. But if we break it down, the term digital transformation, let's look at the why. Why organization is saying that we need to do digital transformation. It's very logical. Globally, organizations are saying that we need to survive and thrive in this digital age and to have this competitive advantage against their competitor, and that they need to change. So it is a matter of survival. Now, how do they do it? So if you look at what is happening today, technology is fully embedded to our life. It's part of our life. So of course, an organization is filled with smart people, yeah, and smart people connect the dot and say that we need to go digital. We need to use technology. That's logical and that's sustainable. But the next question, who will take this up? Now that's the burning question. So if you look at the second part of the buzzword, transformation is always linked to people. It's always about change. It's not binary, it's not coding, but rather people accepting the fact that they need to use technology to bring more value. So in short, to me, digital transformation definition is fundamentally about organization rethinking of the doing and working to survive and thrive in this digital age. It is about how an organization adopts technology and use new ways of working, new ideas, innovation to reach greater height in attaining their business objective.
Thanks so much for that. Well, I actually really share your view here that ultimately it's about who is going to be doing it. So ultimately it starts to become a people aspect. Good, Bastian, you're involved in a digital transformation, I would say, almost on a day-to-day basis. So what's your view on what this means and how's your company using this?
Yeah, I'm really aligned with what Esther is saying. And if you look at digital transformation, it's so easy to think it's only about technology, but it's so much more about humans. And if you look at digital transformation, we approach it as a change project, a change program. And if you look at change programs, 2 out of 3 change management programs fail. So only 1 out of 3 is successful. And why do those 2 out of 3 fail? Is because typically the software is undermanaged and the hardware is overmanaged. And with the software, I mean the culture, the people, the skills. And the hardware is technology hardware, but also the formal organization, those type of KPIs, the formal processes. That's where typically people focus a lot of time. Whereas in digital transformation, it's even more important to focus on the software, the culture you're building. And the culture is really much in my type of work, which is focused on the commercial side of things. It's about how open are you to test and learn, to try new things. So if I hire, for example, new people, I don't really look at how much certificates they have, how much years experience they have in digital transformation, because it's going to be all outdated in a couple of months. It's not relevant. What's relevant is how passionate are people about learning new things, adopting new technology, being very curious. And I think that's for me the most important things. And that's what I try to build in my team and build within other teams, that the curiosity about new technologies and how do you test and learn these new technologies is the most important part in this transformation process.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's a very good take. And I think one of the things you mentioned really resonates with me is, it's actually about change. It's a change project. So someone who's been involved with change management for almost close to 30 years is Laurie from Australia. So I'm pretty sure he has some good comments and thoughts about how that relates to digital transformation as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'm just checking you can hear me. We've had to make sure that it works well. It's great to hear the previous definitions, and you probably saw me nodding because the emphasis was on the transformation. I think we forget that second part of the word, and it brings the people in. And dare I say, I've been old enough to see a number of digital transformations from the moment that we started basic computing. Yes, everybody, I did basic computing in basic, and then we went to one of the biggest ones people had. We would never actually have books again. We would everything would be on CD-ROMs. We soon found out that didn't work, did it? You know. So what I'm saying to you is, to me, the definition is about resetting your business to suit and operate in a digital economy. So resetting your business. So I approach this a little bit differently in that, have you got the capability and the ability to reset your business? Now, you may make a decision not to, and that's fine. And the consequences will be there. But to me, it's about, how do you transform your existing business? And in our discussion today, I'll bring up where I see some pitfalls. So I think I commend our other speakers about bringing the transformation in for people. And in part of that, how do we actually position our business, not forgetting our stakeholders? And that's what I'd like to see injected into that definition. Thank you.
Absolutely. And I like your quote around CD-ROMs. The other day I was clearing out the house and I still found a whole stack of them and that's actually not that long ago. It's 10, 15 years when we started to do all of these transformation projects and new versions through those kinds of installations. It's all obsolete, lying in the corner right now.
That's right. And I think have we ever thought about, when we are adjusting our business and future-proofing our business? And I think there's some interesting things there about picking up on the speakers about making sure that we've got the right people, that we encourage people to think out of the square. It's very easy to say we're going to be digital first, or we're going to add digital priority, but what does it actually mean?
Absolutely. So we already see loads of questions coming in on the right-hand side. So if it's okay with the panelists, I'm going to dive right in them, because otherwise we're never going to be able to complete all of that, and we could be talking for hours. And one of the questions that really triggered my attention, and I'd like to start with Dr. Esther's thoughts on that, is a question that has just come in from Mark. And he's asking if you think about, or where should businesses start with digital transformation? Is it people's first, or is it processes first? And especially why? And I think that's a very good question to consider. Dr. Esther, what are your thoughts?
That's a really great question, yeah. And basically, if a business wants to start digital transformation, yeah, they shouldn't just look at people first. They shouldn't look at process first. They should look at business requirement. They should look in the form that what is the business needs, yeah? Then map it to that. It could be a process, it could be a people, but that fundamental understanding, that problem statement needs to set first. Then with that, you can start strategizing which area to focus. That's my answer to that.
Absolutely. Laurie, I saw you're nodding. I think you have something to add to that.
Yeah, really good question. I would rephrase it slightly, that rather than thinking people and process, I would ask you to think about those two, but in the context of what is our current capability and our capability that we need, and what is our current ability and the ability that we need. Two different things. Capability of your business now and in the future, ability that you have in your workforce, but also ability. If we forget about ability, it is with your stakeholders and your clients. What is their ability to actually accept this change now and in the future? Maybe that's a way of rethinking. And out of that, you may find there that there might be some process stuff, but also some people stuff. So maybe that's just a recouching of that. I hope that helps.
Yeah, I totally agree with Laurie. There must be a focus, what problem you want to address first. Absolutely. Yeah, and the rest, because sometimes it's a combination.
Oops.
I think, Dr. Esther, you're on mute, or your screen went to mute for a second. So.
Oh dear, I have no idea how that happens.
No worries. We still, even with digital transformation today, it's us going through that.
Okay, I love what Laurie said just now, because he's absolutely right. Yeah, he's absolutely right about addressing the capacity, the capability of the organization in that question as well. And sometimes this I have experienced this many times. Sometimes the problem whereby both sides, both process and people, are equally important in a digital transformation.
Absolutely. So maybe it's also good to hear Bastian's perspective. He's working in an organization where there is a lot of change. Where do you typically start?
Well, first of all, it's getting your strategy right. You have your strategy and you have your environment you operate in, your competitors, your historical organization, and everything that comes with the environment. And those two components, so the strategy and your environment, will define how you balance your process and your people in the best way. And typically it goes hand in hand. Sometimes you need to balance and focus a bit more on people. So if you have a really traditional focused organization, you probably need to train people or get new people in that are more digital savvy. But in some cases, you might have a very strong digital organization, but the processes are just not there. So I think it really depends on the situation you're in, and the situation is defined by strategy and environment in my case.
Yeah, good. Bastian, if I can stay with you for a second, one of the questions that came in, I think it's very closely related to what you were just saying, is if we have that strategy up front, how can we define whether digital transformation is working in an organization? Is there any way that you measure success?
Yeah, it's a very very hot topic, and after being 6-7 years in digital transformation within one company in all different parts of the world, Europe, Africa, Asia, it's still not one or two KPIs or metrics that define success. That's very interesting, I think, and that already shows how complex it is. So there's a couple of things you can look at in my business. How big is your share in e-commerce? So yes, you can look at it. But one could have a fantastic high share in e-commerce. But if you don't sell anything in brick and mortar anymore, you're still not being successful. You cannot say my digital transformation is successful. So what we typically do is still rely on the quite traditional KPIs such as total market share or total brand health metrics, as we call it in marketing. If your digital transformation is successful, it in the end will result, for example, in market share or in revenue growth, profit. It again goes back to what's your strategy. So I think there's no real sexy KPIs or metrics that will define the success of your digital transformation, at least in my situation.
So no single magic bullet that would solve all of our questions right away. That's unfortunate. Good. I do think it's a really good question, and I'd like to expand a little bit on that. I see tons of questions coming in, so I'll just go a little bit from one to another. Laurie, I would like to pick your brains on the next one, and that's looking at the way to deal with digital transformation. I don't know if you can see it on the screen, but I'll just read it out right now. Mohammed Nasri says, most of the time we ended up in a vicious cycle of digital transformation, so one after the other.
Yep.
In this case, there are so many tools available. Where is too much transformation detrimental to an organization? I think that's a really excellent question.
It is, and I've witnessed that. And one of the things, the reason that I come from this, I did a lot of organisation maturity assessments. The reason I bring that in, because I saw the problems that we had when organisations just did one transformation after another, and they largely did it from a technical base. And it ended up causing a lot more problems in the organisation. Where it was detrimental was you actually found that people just left, and that was a really good indicator. Good people left the company. They had enough. They tried and they left. And we were also seeing customers leaving and questioning. So it links into the previous question a bit about, we also have to change. If we're transforming the way we're doing business and being prepared, we also have to think about new ways of measuring success as well, and measuring investment. I'll finish there by saying too much transformation is detrimental. you're forgetting, you're thinking about, you're in the paradigm then that it's actually tools will save us. It's not tools at all. It may be a blended approach. And you've got to be careful, particularly if you're in a global company, you can't expect your own cultural norms to be adopted in other areas. So you have to retrain that flexibility. What might be online and working brilliantly in one community is needing a blended approach. So I think it's a great question. My problem is if you find that people are saying this is a tool solution, then you're not really doing digital transformation. You are doing an IT-based approach. What we are wanting, I believe, is the business to say, this is how we're going to support, of which there are various tools we can use.
So if I were to summarize it, it's not a project, it's more of a mindset. Is that correct?
Yes, and I do believe if you can then, that's where there is some good guidance. Think about, I do guidance from managing successful programs, for example. Think if you adopt what is the target operating model here, it has tools as one thing, but it also has other things like culture, organization, process, knowledge and learning. They're all other things that you need to bring in. And when they're not brought along and they're actually impacted by just focusing on tools, you've got to say we're not going to reach that target operating model. So I think the person who answered that, Mahim, I think you have a look at what your target operating model might be, of which tools are just one component.
Good. I fully second that.
Jan, I would like to add on.
Yeah, go ahead.
Airlines is no stranger to change or transformation. We have gone through at least 7 transformation, digital transformation being the latest, and absolutely agree with Laurie in the part about culture, people culture, because transformation will happen whether we like it or not. Next year we might have a new transformation, the AI transformation. We don't know, but the most important part for the organization is to build a culture where people are more resilient and adaptable. And that helps any transformation.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Esther, and maybe you can expand a little bit on that, because I see a question coming in which is specifically on culture. So I'll project that to the screen right now. The question is coming from Mark. What is the culture for your organization that you would need to have for digital transformation? Do you have any tips on how to establish that?
That's a great question. First of all, in Malaysia Airlines, we have a few flagship programs to build this strong culture of resiliency and agility. And it's generally not just about learning technology. It's about adopting new ways of working. Things like going lean, going design thinking, doing being agile and whatnot. So all those cultural mindset programs were rolled out together, as well as using success case study to motivate employee to be more innovative. So that is another element which is really important in building a stronger culture. At the same time, the organization needs to support other aspects of the employee growth. I mean, change is a very painful thing for a lot of employees. So you need to be there as an organization to support their wellness as well. So if let's say you come to a group of people and say you guys got to change, and you don't take into account their wellness, their stress level, then your transformation is bound to fail. So you have to put all this in your digital transformation aspect.
Absolutely, yes. And I think I already found my quote of the day is a change is a painful thing. And that's something worth to live by. I've seen a question coming in, which I think is also really interesting. And it's actually from one of our speakers from yesterday, Eric, who's also joining from Australia. Maybe, Bas, can you shed your light on this? Because it looks a little bit more on the internal side. So we've established that change is this mindset. It's a multi-year program, and it's in many cases, it's more of a top-down approach. How would you deal with internal stakeholders to adapt to these changes? How do you make sure that this will not become such a painful thing?
So yeah, and I think the question was also related to COVID, and that will help answering my question. So prior to COVID, digital transformation was a whole other task. And there's this funny image that's going around in a digital transformation community. Who is driving your digital transformation? Is it your CIO? Is it your CTO? Or is it COVID? And it is COVID. So, and if I look at my KPIs, I ticked all the boxes in 2020 easily. So my objectives were fantastically. And COVID has helped me tremendously to achieve that, because there was simply there was no choice. There was no choice. So prior to COVID, we had a choice, and you needed to get stakeholders on board, and it used to be a fight. Yeah, you need to prove every time and time again, why is this needed? Why is it? So you come with the Kodak case, and you come with all kinds of other cases that companies who were out of business because they were not able to innovate and not able to adapt to digital transformation. But that used to be the practice a lot. And in fact, after COVID, I feel my role is getting slightly less relevant, because the marketing director is getting so well equipped in digital transformation. They're learning so fast from one day to another. We did it. There was no choice. So everything went digital. So e-commerce went through the roof suddenly, where they didn't want to do e-commerce 2 months before. So I think COVID has helped me personally a lot to convince stakeholders to adapt, and they realize that there's no choice. I think how they adapt, there's still a big role to play. So how do you then try new things? Don't suddenly move all your budget into a new activity, but test and learn. And test and learn sounds easy, but how do you test? How do you build your hypotheses? How do you build your metrics? How long does a test take? And there comes a bit of science behind as well. And I think that's a very, very great journey to be and focus on that, how to drive this change instead of why, focusing on the why.
Absolutely. I think that's a very interesting comment, that COVID's actually been the driving change for many organizations in this whole transformation project.
Yeah.
If we think about that a little bit more deeply, does that mean that it is here to stay? So the transformation organizations have been going through, is that going to stay, or do you think people will go back towards the more traditional ways of that businesses have been operating? You read a lot about the fact that people have a very short memory, and that they're gonna fall back into more older behavior patterns. So maybe, Laurie, can I pick your brain on this? Being in the behavioral space for quite some time, what's your thoughts on that?
I think I'll link in with a bit of an answer to the previous question, is how the internal stakeholders respect their internal stakeholders. Respect that the person that may not be an IT specialist can actually have a really big input into showing how the company can move, and respect their ideas, and don't dominate one particular approach that's going to be a fit-all for all markets or even in all areas. So I think that's the first thing, respect. And your second question was, what was it? Could you just refresh me again, Jan? That was just about...
The second question is, are we going to go back into our older behavior when we get, hopefully one day, out of this pandemic? Is the need for digital transformation going to subside?
We will see, already we are seeing a real thirst for people to meet back again face-to-face. You know, I'm concerned that this period has been a great period of time where people have hidden behind keyboards, have hidden behind screens, and yet there's a real thirst. We are social animals, and there is a real thirst for that. So I can see that it's going to be, the pendulum's gone one way. I feel that we're going to then have, what we will go back to is a more blended business solution, where people want to meet face to face. They want to do things. So there'll be more of a blended situation, and that will go right through in the way commerce is done, in the way training is undertaken. I think we'll see a resetting to a blended. I think people really are tired of using their home office. As you can see, my cat behind me, she is not upset with living at home whatsoever. But at people's offices, we've got a great insight to everyone's home. But that in itself is causing a problem because we can't separate home and work. And I think people are going to rebel as we start going through.
Good. That's a very good comment. I'd like to go back to Bas for kind of a reaction very quickly. Do you think that marketing and marketing budgeting are going to go back also more towards events, so brick and mortar spend? What's your view on that?
Yeah, there will be some budget going back to the physical activities and for good reasons. As Laurie said, we are social species, so we like to interact with people, and people like to also shop in brick and mortar, touch products. For example, we also sell infant nutrition milk. People that buy that first time, that infant nutrition, they want to feel that product. They want to touch it. They want to see it in store. There's hardly people that buy the first time products for the babies online because they want to see it. So yes, there will be some budgets moving back to brick and mortar, but the growth will still be on digital. It will continue to grow for sure. And what we see happening, if you look at e-commerce versus brick and mortar sales, is that you see that the curve is the e-commerce growth is flattening, but it is still, if you compare it, for example, in our business, our category for infant nutrition. When I started this role in 2019, it was 2% to 5% was sold in e-commerce. It's now up to 40%, and that's in 2.5 years. And if I would have told my managing director 2.5 years in 2.5 years this would happen, he would probably fire me. He would say, "You're nuts. You don't know what you're talking about." Yeah. And then yet it's there, so it can change very quickly. It will flatten now a bit, but digital will grow.
Good. So speaking about those life necessities, I think combined with the fact that we kind of want to see things again, the airline industry is obviously what I'm going to go into. The going back on holidays, going back on planes. Dr. Esther, what's your view on that? And do you think Malaysia Airlines will go back towards more traditional operating models, or is the digital first here to stay?
It's definitely here to stay. In fact, if you look at the Malaysia AI blueprint, aviation is the first and the fastest to adopt technology, because we really need to use technology to safeguard our passengers, our clients. At the same time, technology has proven itself to be able to do a lot of other things. So what happened here is last year, thanks to COVID, digital transformation definitely accelerated, not just for our digitally or technical trained employees, but across all. And we actually sent a survey to our people. And we asked them this: you want to go back to the office? Yeah? Would you like to go back to working like the past? And the response from the survey was, not astounding, because we kind of know that more than 80% of our employees wish to maintain in the virtual space. They're very happy working in a hybrid working model. Of course, there are some who are unhappy because they miss the interaction, and they have several issues like, the hardware problem, internet connectivity, having a nice space in the home that they can, do their work. So to answer your question, we are going to change, and we are going to move even faster in this digital transformation. Yeah,
I would like to ask you one follow-up question, because you kind of triggered me on something, and you're responsible for leading a lot of people. How do you deal with these two conflicting perspectives of the people who want to keep working from home remotely versus the people who really want to go back towards the office? From your personal experience and the way that you manage the company, how do you deal with that?
Well, we can't, enforce several policy on the people, but obviously one of the way we do it is through the safety aspect. We try to minimize people interaction within each other. Yeah, but let's say if a person do not have the right conducive working environment for them, they can go to one of our open offices as long as they maintain the SOP, COVID SOP. Then they can work in a flexible, office space. We have hot desking that they can register for.
That's a very good point to make. One of the areas that is very closely related with that is how do you deal with people that don't want to change? And it's always a topic that comes up with digital transformation. Is there's always going to be resistance. You just mentioned change is a very hard thing. So I see some other questions coming in that are specific on that topic. So I'd like to move to that, because that's always something that, especially from a management perspective, is obviously very, very important. I'd like to start with Laurie for this one, if that's okay with you. And I'll just project the question on the screen for a second. It's coming from Mohammed. How do you overcome resistance to change? So what are your ideas for the people who don't want to go along?
That's interesting. I have been called a dinosaur in certain areas, not wanting to change. I don't know why at all. I think I'm quite up there. But I think what we do think, people, the resistance to change is trying to understand why that person, it goes back to get some guidance on good change management. And if you go back through, there are some excellent guidance on there, and understanding what might unlock that person. But just also the second thing I would say is consider why that person, considering creating a more collaborative and safe zone where that person in the workplace can express how they're feeling. And finally, it may be a point where you'll have to transition out. If it's not going to help for that person, the best thing they can do is leave where they are, for both the company's perspective and their person. So if you're going to look at that, it shows respect. You've got to respect and value that person's opinion, create an environment of a safe zone and collaborative teams, and then try and understand where this can help, because each person has something to contribute. Even if they're an old dinosaur, they still have something to contribute, and we've got to unlock and find that.
Absolutely. Well, for the record, Laurie, let me say that I don't consider you a dinosaur at all. So I think age actually doesn't have anything to do with mindset. And I know a lot of people who are having had long careers are way more agile or way more flexible than some, even that people are very young or are entering the workforce. So I really appreciate your take on that. I'd like to continue with Bastian to kind of follow up a little bit on that, and I'd like to do it based upon a question that just came in from Kurt. And he mentions that resistance to change is often caused by fear of an unknown future, and I think that's a really good comment to make. So Bastian, you will probably also have in your teams people who fear the future or are uncertain about their job or the scope or the fact that they're becoming irrelevant. You just even mentioned, maybe my job even becomes obsolete in a couple of years from now. How do you deal with in your teams with that fear of the unknown?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things behind that, and the fear, you need to understand what is the reason, and typically, for example, it is people that are afraid to lose their job. So what I did from the first moment I entered my new role and had my first speech for the team, I told them, guys, I have one assignment from the boss, and it's to make myself redundant. If I make myself redundant, I did my job well, because then a digital transformation guy is not needed anymore.
So I have to ask, how did they respond to that?
And they said, you're crazy because you just moved from Singapore to Malaysia. Why would you do that for a job where you're going to make redundant? So that's how I try to create trust in the team. That, wow, if the manager is so confident of moving his family from Singapore to Malaysia for a job he's going to make redundant, I'm going to trust this guy because he knows what he's doing, and he knows it's for the right thing. So that's what I try to give. So that's one thing how I try to create trust in the team. The second thing I typically do is reference visits. So what I do, I take people to, and that's senior management, but also people that are resistant to change, to, for example, Facebook office, to the Google office. Yes, it's a little bit shiny and you get free lunch and stuff, but it works, it engages them, and it opens up their mind typically. But I also go to other organizations to see how technology is leveraged in a way that can really help them. And then you have discussion, okay, how would your future role look like if in 2 or 3 years' time, when technology is fully embedded in the organization?
Yeah.
And give them the trust, they have the capacity and capability to work in that new environment. And yes, I need to agree with Laurie. Sometimes you need to be firm and need to decide it's not a great fit anymore. And there's probably other organizations you might fit better. So those cases are there as well.
Well, I actually think that's some great advice, and especially I really like the thing that you're mentioning about the site visits, because it gets people out of their comfort zone. It shows them a different perspective. So I think that's actually really valuable advice. I'd like to follow up on that a little bit in combination with the trust that you mentioned with Dr. Esther. Is in Malaysia Airlines, is there ways in which you kind of get people out of their comfort zone, and how do you organize that?
Well, I love what both Laurie and Bastian talk about, the change, the fear, and the connecting and the respect. Yeah. So those are really key points here in getting people to adapt to the change. Yeah. Totally agree. We need to respect their opinion. Yeah. And we need to share with them on what the impact of change give them. Yeah. Both good and bad. Change will definitely create a redundancy in their role, but it could be just a particular task that will be removed out and creating more capacity from them. Be transparent about that. Now, but the biggest thing that we did that drive digital transformation is we create this avenue where our top management, our middle management gets to reach all the way to the ground. This really tight-knit communication, ongoing, constant communication with everybody, highlighting why the change is required, highlighting what we want to do next, and very transparent sharing on what is going on in the aviation field, which is affecting our livelihood. So this elevates a little bit of that fear from those people, and as well as give them a sense of purpose. So if you want a really successful digital transformation, give the people a sense of purpose, respect their thought, be transparent about what will happen if they don't take up the change, what will happen to them personally and the organization. That's my thought. Yeah.
Absolutely, I think that's a very good comment. You definitely see that organizations where you break down that barriers, you start to see with your own eyes, typically have way more of that trust. I'd like to move a little bit into that from a more methodological approach. These concepts typically come out of the agile and the lean movements, where people are really motivated to lead by example, to go out to the floor, experience what is going on. Laurie, if I can ask you, what would be key, I would say, best practices that you could share that you think the audience could benefit from if they would want to go down this path?
Look, I think one of the biggest things, that's why, is this understanding what data really means. And I think that when we're looking at transforming, and I mean that that's where I particularly like some of the things that you've done and promote with, understanding what data, enterprise big data means. And that's something that every advisory board should have a basic. If you've got a board giving advice to an organization that doesn't understand what data is, then quite frankly, they're not doing their job. If they haven't changed for a number of years, then they haven't transformed as well. So my advice, first of all, something that you've developed, Jan-Willem, is allowing people to understand and not be frightened by that. I think where we're missing the link is that we've forgotten probably what some of the really good approaches in program and project management offer, particularly the program, managing successful programs, looking at that. The version 5 has really been refreshed and is very approachable for digital transformation. It focuses on all the things that we talked about today, setting that target operating model, ensuring you've got people coming together, making sure you're talking about bringing capability together for landing points. That's what we've been talking about. That sort of areas, I think there's a push and understanding. The third area is in change management. We've been talking about, we could have been having a discussion today about change management. So I think demystifying what data is and not to be frightened of it, and making sure the advisory people have that guidance, understanding some of the theories of change, and there's ways you can get through there, and also understand that we probably need to revisit some of the great program approaches, and we have approaches who are adapting to suit the environments, like MSP version 5, for example. They're my 3 areas.
Thanks so much. I think that's very good insights. I'd like to pick, first of all, the brain of Dr. Esther, and then I'll end with Bastiaan. And so that's going to be kind of our last question on that. Dr. Esther, Laurie said some very interesting things in how do you educate, especially senior leadership on data, on digital transformation. How do you deal with that in a massive company like yours?
Wow. To be honest, Malaysia Airlines has always been using data to drive strategic business decision. So there wasn't much I need to do in terms of influencing them into taking data, right? Because they are super aware about how important data plays in any decision. Yeah. But one thing that that really accelerates data among not the top management, because they are already there, or even the senior and mid management, but among those on the ground, among the executive, the non-executive, to get them to be more open to data, that when they come to a presentation, they show information and insights. So that's where we are focusing on, and things that we do to get them to be more motivated in that. It's lead by example. Yeah. So this is where we get people from the ground, even our cabin crew, to use technology like Power BI and whatnot to come up with dashboard and show really interesting information. And yes, Jan, I have cabin crew who use low-code technology to run data insights, to build business application using Power Apps, because people has the potential to adapt and to change. Yeah.
Yes, I think that's some very insightful things, and that's really, first of all, cool and nice to hear that they're doing that. Final question is then for you, Bastiaan. How do you deal with that knowledge and skills gap throughout the different layers of the organization in your teams, but also surrounding teams? Because Friesland Campina comes from a more traditional production world. How do you make the different layers of the organization familiar around these changes?
Yeah, so producing milk is indeed a very traditional business, and we used to be able to do that without any data. So it used to be an easy job. Nowadays, it's quite a technical process, I must say. But if I look more at the commercial part, there's 2 things. There's one, the skills and capabilities, where we have a partner like Cybiant that's helping us to build those skills and capabilities, and making sure that the people are enabled with the right knowledge and skills to develop dashboards, to read dashboards, to understand what's an insight versus an observation. All those kind of things need to be embedded throughout the organization. So that's one, the building the capabilities and skills in the organization. The second one is monocultural level. So in all our conversations, in all our presentations, data is the key in decision making. So if you go to the management team for a decision and you don't come with data, it's not even presented in the management team. You don't get the chance to present it. So that's a cultural thing. Another thing is that people need to speak up and need to also be able to say to senior management, hey, how is your decision based on data? Because yeah, you talk a lot about I have the feeling that, and it used to be okay for senior management to say that I have the feeling that we should go left. And nowadays you see more junior people say, okay, but how is your feeling based on data? Where do you base your decision? And that's where I see the huge change happening. So it's not only top down, it's also bottoms up where you see a change happening.
Absolutely, and I think that those are some very, very good closing remarks. So data is not going to go away. Digital transformation is here to stay, and it's how do we get people into the right mindset in order to drive this further. As you guys know, I can probably talk with you for another few hours on this topic. It's a very engaging panel, and also I think a very fun one. So it almost doesn't feel like we're in a conference, but in an actual living room together, even though we're all located at different places around the earth. I want to say a very big thank you to all of our panelists. This has been a very fantastic discussion. So thank you so much, Laurie, Dr. Esther, and Bastiaan, for contributing your time, sharing your views and your expert opinion. I think a lot of people actually like this. We've had tons of questions to moderate. So thank you so much for your time and so much for your engagement. It's really, really sincerely appreciated. We unfortunately need to close the session right now because we already have a next speaker who is waiting to start presenting in a few minutes. The next speaker is going to be Vipul Tiwari, who is an RPA engineer from Amazon. And he's actually become the MVP, most valuable person, for 2 years in a row on his automation project. So he's going to share his insights on how you can use hackathons to use and create new ideas. So this is also proving to be a very interesting presentation. So I'm going to give everyone a very short break, and we're going to continue again at 1 o'clock for this next presentation. Thanks again to the panel. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you very much, everybody. Goodbye.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.